views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, good evening, and welcome to Bronx Talk. This is a very exciting show, I think, for a number of different reasons. Everybody knows that when we have a new mayor, the mayor generally will pick their own chancellor. One of our Bronx education heroes was the chancellor. We actually have a new chancellor who is also a Bronx education hero. That's for another day. But Dr. Misha Porter is no longer the chancellor. And then the news came down that she was going to be the president and CEO of the Bronx Community Foundation. Light bulbs went on here at BronxNet and said, we've got to bring in the Bronx Community Foundation, find out what it is, find out why Dr. Porter has said, you know what, this is what I'm going to put my extreme talents to develop. And that's where we are tonight, the Bronx Community Foundation. So let's say first, nice to see Dr. Misha Porter. You had a chance to take a deep breath now. You're a little more relaxed than you were maybe a month ago.
Yes, I look a little more relaxed, people tell me.
All right. Well, you look fine, and we're just thrilled to have you with us. And she is, as you know, the first Black female chancellor in the history of our great city, and also now president and CEO of the Bronx Community Foundation. The co-founders, and this is where we get into what is the Bronx Community Foundation, are Derrick Lewis and Desmond Lewis. They are brothers, I have found out. And so nice to have you gentlemen with us. Let's start with you, Desmond. Just give us a little background, number one, about the two of you, and what is the Bronx Community Foundation? We'll make Dr. Porter wait just a moment or two.
Sure. So, and Gary, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Sure. She understands that this is a team effort regardless.
Yes.
It's the BX, and that we're never going to survive if we all don't do it. Anyway, go ahead, Desmond. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. And thank you for allowing us to come here and talk about this great work. And we're happy to have Dr. Porter here as well. So just quick background on Derrick and I, born and raised in the South Bronx, in the Morris Heights section of the Bronx. We call ourselves products of philanthropy because my brother and I really were born out of a family of people who've dedicated their lives to Bronx nonprofits and the Bronx community as a whole. The women who raised us were frontline workers. Our grandmother worked at Bronx Lebanon Hospital for 50. She retired on her 50th year at Bronx Lebanon. Our aunt, the other woman who raised us, worked at Our Lady of Mercy Hospital, was Our Lady of Mercy. It's now called Monty North. And then our mother, she worked at the Bronx Department of Sanitation for many, many years. And our father was a civil rights activist. He worked in the construction industry in the Bronx in the 60s and 70s, fighting for minority jobs. And so my brother and I, in our background, we grew up, in that environment, a family of people who've given back to the Bronx. And, through that upbringing, growing up in affordable housing, having, the many nonprofits, the great nonprofits in the Bronx support us growing up, whether it was food insecurity, whether it was getting on the internet, whether it was going to school, all of that was supported by Bronx nonprofits. And so my brother and I always knew we wanted to give back. And that's really sort of how the origin story of the foundation, the idea came to fruition just through our family experience.
All right. So, Derrick, let's talk about the creation of the foundation. I hear this from a lot of different people in the Bronx. There are many of us who understand like a global look at what's going on. And you guys seem to have adopted it and made it your own and said, you know what, we want to do something. So how did you position this foundation? How long ago was it? And what are you attempting to do?
No, so to your point, the Community Foundation as a construct is a known entity, but we wanted to provide our own Bronx spin to the concept of a community foundation. And the idea really came about a few years ago. As Desmond mentioned, we're products of philanthropy, and we said, how can we give back to the Bronx, to a community, give back to a community that has given us so much? And so we knew that the foundation of giving back is really also aligned to being more philanthropic in our community and giving back in a way that, we believe could be unique to the Bronx. And so we also know that the nonprofit community in the Bronx is a very important community and sector in the Bronx and provides value and significant value, I should say, to our community. And so we said, how can we really help and support our nonprofits, but also solve some of the systemic challenges that the Bronx faces? And we knew that we didn't want to create a net new organization that was doing, by and large, the same work that existing organizations in the Bronx were doing.
Many of them, I have to interject, many of them doing incredible work, life-saving work in every way, whether it be housing or food security or, environmental justice. I mean, on and on and on. We know what they are. We celebrate them all the time on our program. So your idea was to enhance what they do.
Correct. It was to support them, to enhance what they do, to provide the resources they needed to continue to do the great work. And so one of the opportunities we saw was there were a lot of great, to your point, a lot of institutions doing great work, but there was a need for an organization to be the bridge to help them collaborate in a more seamless and efficient way, but also help bring additional resources so that they continue to expand their capacity and expand their impact in the Bronx. And so a community foundation as an organization obviously plays the role to be a convener, to help, enable strategic thinking, to bring all different types of resources, whether it's more dollars, more individuals to volunteer and help support, more resources around strategy development.
Connections to personnel and all those, certainly those workforce to help our people, and I talk about Bronx people, get the opportunity.
By Bronx people for Bronx people.
To me, the key word in the whole package is foundation, as opposed to, because that implies, a foundation, but something that is almost an umbrella. Dr. Porter, one of the things that I read in some of the literature that was sent to me and reading on the website, and I'm just going to quote right from it. It says, "It is our belief that we're at an inflection point." And I want to pursue that with you. I tell this story all the time. In the late 90s, I was reporting for BronxNet. Freddie Ferrer stood under the L at 161st Street, and we had a big press conference, and he had a big picture, a big poster. I probably should get a copy of that because I love to use it. And it said, "Don't dump on the Bronx." I felt that was another inflection point because it made us all realize, and it's a horrible thing to say, nobody's doing it for us. We better figure it out ourselves. And since that time, I mean, the numbers fluctuate, but there could be 1,500. I think it was Desmond who told me there are 2,000 nonprofits. So, Dr. Porter, is this an inflection point? Why do you think it's an inflection point? And then, of course, what does the community, the Bronx Community Foundation, aim to do to address those things?
It absolutely is. And I'll tell you, Gary, I think I'm part of that. I was part of that inflection point with Freddie Ferrer. The school that I became the principal of grew out of his vision for the Bronx. And this moment for me, and I think, and for the foundation, is about, really building a collaborative space that supports nonprofits across the Bronx. We've seen recently, as the last weeks, CBOs, nonprofits, our elected officials come together in a real way around the Bronx. And I've always said in my work as an educator in the Bronx, that my time as chancellor was shorter than my entire career, which was in the Bronx. And I've always said that my goal was to retell the Bronx tale and recreate the narrative, because there's always been a narrative about the Bronx, that one that we don't share. We talk about the beauty of our borough. We talk about the joys that we've had growing up in this borough, but we recognize that there are longstanding systemic problems that need to be addressed. And they're going to be addressed by Bronxites. They're going to be addressed by people who believe in the borough and believe in possibilities for this borough.
And, I'm going to read right from, again, your literature. The Bronx is rightfully having its moment, buoyed by its vibrant culture. I love that because we spent it. Listen, there's nothing wrong with reading and math and science and all the things that we need, but it oozes out of us. When I walk down the street to the grocery store and I see people from all over the world who are just living and working together, and then you'll see, all different kinds of music and everything else. These are the things that those of us who are hardcore Bronxites, as it were, fully understand. Dr. Porter, how does this operate in your mind now that you're the president and CEO, wanting to give it some direction? What are the steps you see that you're going to take a step and move it forward?
The first steps are what we are all talking about right now. It's partnering, it's collaborating, it's communicating, it's talking to the people, it's talking to the nonprofit leaders across the borough, it's connecting with our elected officials. It's ensuring that we are creating a space that the Bronx believes in, and that we are looking collaboratively to move forward. And the great thing is that that's been my work all along. I believe very deeply in. My school grew out of collaboration. The district I ran grew out of collaboration. And as the chancellor of the Department of Education, I believed it was really important that we partner with families and communities to reopen our schools. And so the first steps are really about having those conversations with key stakeholders, residents of the borough, and really thinking forward about, the foundation. You talked about foundation, what it implies. It implies resources, but it also implies building a strong base for where we go from here. And that's what I'm most excited about. That strong base comes from working collaboratively with the people.
I'm going to do the fill in the blank question. The name of the school, by the way, is the Bronx School for Law, Government, and Justice, which was an innovative school. We could talk about Dr. David Banks and what he's doing. Of course, he's the next chancellor. How ironic that the two chancellors are coming out of the BX. Maybe we know something. I don't know which of you want to answer this. So let's just go through it. The principles or the subjects that you're working on are community, equity and justice, economic security, and health. But the bottom line word that keeps coming up in your website and all the literature is sustainability. I'd like to talk about the difference between, we'll give out, food now because we have a serious food insecurity problem, or we'll work on eviction protections because we're now going to have a housing problem. But how do you sustain that? So I don't know. Derrick is shaking his head yes, so we're going to let Derrick be the first one to respond to that. But I'll give you both a chance to talk about the notion of sustainability.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And it's sustainability and also resilience. Right. So it's one thing to be able to put together, and when we say sustainability, we mean being able to actually identify solutions, implement those solutions with our partners, whether it be nonprofits, the small businesses that we've supported over the last few years. And we've, given a lot of money to small businesses to help them sustain themselves and grow, even during a pandemic. The individuals that we've supported. It's really putting together a framework and a capability and a plan so that we can solve some of these challenges and then ensure that we're supporting over time so that the challenges don't come back. And when I use the word resilience, it's being able to recover and then also go back to a vibrant environment and also continue to build upon those solutions so that we can move things forward so that we don't have to go back to the same challenges and issues we had before, or we can solve some of those challenges and then build upon a more prosperous environment. And I'm not sure if Desmond or Misha.
So here's, a presentation to, people that new players are here trying to work. But the key for me is that, and I'm going to make the assumption that it's collaborative, that Absolutely. It's not top down. Correct. It's not a matter of our plan. I mean, I've seen the names of some of the organizations that are on your website that are already collaborating. Many of them I know extremely well. Let's talk a little bit then, Desmond. Sure. We could pick any one of these items, whether it be community, equity and justice, economic security, and health. Where are you at? What do you think? What strikes you? What do we need to do first, aside from all of the above? And how do you look at this process of building nonprofits in the borough of the Bronx?
So one of the things we tend to point towards is something we call the concentric circle vision, right? So, and Derrick and I experienced this growing up in the Bronx. You know, we relied on nonprofits who put food on our table. We relied on nonprofits who kept the roof over our head. We relied on nonprofits to help us get on the internet, right? At the early, you know, aging ourselves here at the early days of the internet to get technology and to learn. And so our vision is that we believe these are concentric circles, meaning that organizations that support in each one of those areas would be stronger collaborating together to solve the needs of our families and our residents. So if you think about it, if Derrick and I growing up and our parents had a need for food or housing support, or we had immigration challenges or schooling, if there was this construct where all the organizations collaboratively provided that service and support, we believe that families could be empowered and there's better outcomes as it relates to building that collaboration. So as a part of some of the work we've recently done is we've brought housing groups and food insecurity organizations and small business leaders together to the table and saying, how can we work together to solve the multifaceted needs of our community members? And so we think that's kind of the innovative way in which we're working to try to help move the needle forward in a much quicker way.
One of the things that I'm aware of because of the numbers of people we talk to here on BronxNet and on my two programs is that people work in silos. And then yes. I hear from one organization and they say, well, we're doing this. And I'm like, you know, last week on the show, I had, and now there's a central place. Dr. Porter, the one thing we really haven't talked about directly is schools, something you know a heck of a lot about. What is the role of schools in this process? I did notice that education was not one of the things that was on that four-pronged list there, but what role do schools have? And of course, your vision of Bronx schools is something we want to understand. So maybe you can articulate that for us.
Yeah, you know, schools are the community. So, you know, it's not like pulled out as an individual pillar, but it definitely is, you know, in all of that. School is the community. Schools are where young people learn about equity and justice. It also is a place where we need to build in the pieces of economic security and what that means. School is the place where young people get glasses, where they see the dentist, where their health needs are met. And so all of these pieces are really a part of what school is. School is second home to so many young people, you know, and so many of our educators in our Bronx schools are from the Bronx. And I think that, you know, the role of education in this borough is really grounded to me in our pillars, right? Like, how do we build a strong community around and in support of our schools and our students? What is the greatest commodity we actually have in this borough? It's young people and investing in them and what they'll do next for our borough. And, you know, I want to bring in the sustainability piece because I think yes. The great moment that we have is to get this pride that we all share about our borough to ensure young people feel it so that our borough remains our borough. Young people invest, they come back, they live, they grow their families here, and they make a deeper investment in our borough for the long term.
And you know, I'll give you a couple other things. Number one, the other thing that schools let you kind of into is that's where the parents are.
Absolutely.
And if you want to talk to parents and if you want to educate them or have them engage them and have them understand their own child's education, schools are, you know, certainly a great place to do that. But I just want to ask you a little bit about your vision as chancellor. What did you learn from being, it was a short period of time, but what did you learn from being the chancellor and getting the vision of not only the Bronx, but the whole city's education system that is applicable here that you're going to say, yeah. I see this now. This is what we need to do.
I think it's what we just talked about, right? One of the things that the pandemic forced us to do in New York City for schools in particular is engage in deep interagency collaboration. The Department of Health, you know, Department of Family and Children Services, right? So all of these agencies had to become really deeply interconnected in a very different way and not operate in silos in service of students and families. And I think that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about, again, building a collaborative space that supports nonprofits, you know, ensures collaboration across groups and teams of people, and really focuses on and prioritize issues to, you know, just continue to build the Bronx.
You were the Bronx executive superintendent, and frankly, you had some very good successes in a very short time as chancellor with in-person learning, the Universal Summer School program, which is music to a lot of people's ears. Talk to me a little bit about the nature of Bronx schools. Are they different from school? Now that you've had a chance to look at everybody's, is there something that characterizes Bronx schools? Or if you go to similar neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens and even parts of Manhattan, you'll get the same thing? Or is there something distinctive about us?
Now that I'm back home, I can say, but I will say that I think that what is different in Bronx schools is a commitment to equity and social justice in education, right? The realization that the Bronx, is the brownest borough in New York City, and ensuring that young people in the Bronx who are faced with housing insecurity, who are faced with food insecurity that we talked about, having leaders and teachers who understand, the social justice aspects of schooling, of ensuring that we're feeding families, of building food banks regularly. That drive to know that school is a holistic place just lives in a really deep way in the Bronx. And it's something that I've always been super proud of. If
I wasn't rooted to this chair because of what we're doing, I would stand up and applaud. It is so much the Bronx. So let's go to you, Desmond. Let's talk a little bit about, if we want to make in schools, just start there, make class sizes smaller. We want to, provide digital access for every child and every family, frankly, in the borough of the Bronx. Is this simply a funding problem? I mean, is it simply a matter of you raise the money, you got more teachers, you build another school, and all of a sudden the classes are smaller, or is there something more involved?
No, it is certainly more involved than that. One of our fundamental principles as an organization is what we're trying to create generational wealth for our youth, generational wealth for our community. And so where that starts is a fundamental shift in what we teach, right? And how we teach it. So, workforce development really, we believe, goes back to educating on the 21st century skill sets, right? So it's about teaching about new technologies. It's about teaching the skill sets that are going to increase the income of our youth, right, as they're graduating from schools. So it certainly, Gary, is not just about creating more schools or funding the schools. There's an element of that, but it's about how do we teach those new workforce development skill sets to get people the jobs that are earning the incomes.
Yeah, and also help the kids see what is the path, because a lot of kids are like, well, if only I could, shoot the jump shot better or kick the soccer ball better, that's how I'll make my living. Boy, it would be great if we could do that. But of course, that's, the chances of that happening are not as great if the child says, you know what, there's an opportunity at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine for me to be a doctor. We're all going to do a lot better. Derrick, let's I'm going to pull out health out of the four pillars that you have there. This is a incredibly difficult time, a challenging time. And of course, every time we look up, the maps show that the Bronx has the darkest numbers because we've got the infections and everything else. Talk to me about, how you would go about. It drives me nuts. Not 62, and yet healthcare is the biggest industry in the borough. I mean, I've never figured that out.
Yeah, so at the foundation, we have been focused on this for a few years now, which is really, one, how do we really understand the challenges around health? You referenced Not 62, which is a great initiative. The studies will say, obviously, the Bronx is the unhealthiest county in the state. But how do we think about, what's challenging our community around health, right? Is it access to fresh produce? Is it, how do we think
Excuse me. Yes, I'm checking the marks. Yes, it is access to fresh produce.
Right. So access to fresh produce.
When we have the largest food market in the world down the block,
Or we're the most northernmost borough with access to produce and farms right north of us, right? So how do we solve that challenge, right? So that's what the foundation has been thinking through and working on. How do we think about, you talked about health, democratizing access to healthcare, right? We have a challenge in the borough around digital access to the internet. As healthcare becomes digital, how do we solve that? Desmond referenced earlier this concentric issue. We need to solve for the digital divide, which can then enable and solve for our health issues. We at the foundation create a food access. We created a food access network, which is focused on engaging organizations in the Bronx that are focused on food insecurity. We brought them together to start solving challenges around food access. But we also know all of this is integrated. Access to food impacts your health. Digital.
I'm going to add in. We're almost out of time, and I'm going to add in the environmental justice thing is a big thing. We can't keep spewing at those peaker plants down in the South Bronx and expect kids to be healthy to get to school and be able to breathe. I mean, but let's start there. I was thinking talk about inflection points. We have a whole new city council delegation, essentially, a whole new assembly delegation, and they're all, frankly, people who look like you guys, who are thinking exactly like you guys. Last question, and I'm going to ask each of you to answer. Dr. Porter, you'll get to sum up. So we'll start with you, Desmond. Where will the foundation be a year from now? Like, how do you see it, and where would you like to be? So Desmond, Derrick, and then Dr. Porter. Go ahead.
So I think a year from now, we would love to have built connectivity to as many, local community leaders, mutual aid organizations, nonprofit institutions, to come up with a plan to collaborate and to be on the journey of designing a vision of where we all believe the foundation can be supportive of the community.
Yeah.
So I think
tell us. Yeah, tell us. And by the way, it's the website is the best way in to connect and all those kinds of things.
Yes.
All right, Derrick, everybody's got about 30 or 45 seconds to do it. So go ahead, Derrick.
So I would say, in a year, my perspective and our vision is really to build connectivity and collaboration amongst the areas that we've been discussing on this interview, which is ensuring that organizations are collaborating, creating the space for them to operate and work together, and then starting to solve some of the systemic and institutional challenges that we have in our borough to make it more prosperous for our Bronxites.
Yes, and maybe now instead of speaking in 10 different voices from 10 different neighborhoods, we can all come together here at the Bronx Community Foundation. Dr. Porter will give you the final word. Next year.
Absolutely.
You're a visionary. Let's hear the vision.
All right. You will see us enacting a strategic plan that grew out of a collaborative process that does exactly what you just said, where we aren't working in 7 different neighborhoods doing 7 different things to solve the same problem, but thinking forward about how we solve the problems of our borough collaboratively with the people. And we'll also be in a place where Bronxites know the Bronx Community Foundation and see it as a resource and a hub for innovation.
That it sounds like the first step is what we're doing today, and that is make the announcements, and then getting all the people who are seeing this and saying, which I can't believe they would say anything other than I love this, and then literally filling out the form on the Connect page and saying, hey, I want to help, or I've got an organization to help. Just so you know, I'm a big after school guys. We got to give our kids stuff to do after schools. The crime numbers will go down. The gang numbers will go down. So let's start there. Anyway, Derrick and Desmon Lewis, you guys are great. We're going to follow. I always tell people I'll follow right behind how you lead us. And then Dr. Misha Porter is going to be leading all of us in this way, putting all the great elements of our wonderful borough together. The Bronx Community Foundation. Thank you all so much. And let's see. Now, next week, we're going to do something fun, different. Our good friend Bobby Sanabria, who is obviously a legendary musician, will join us. We'll talk about music and how it applies to our borough, how it can help solve some of the problems. We'll bring in the Bronx Music Heritage Center, and we'll talk about West Side Story and what the new West Side Story has done for the image of Puerto Ricans in the Bronx and all over the world. Should be a fun show. That's it. We'll see you then next week. Good night.